particular form of escape has never been attempted by anyone, anywhere. For your information, this cell contains 2 tons of water.
Harry Houdini died on Halloween 1926 after a student punched him in the stomach. For 100 years, everyone believed those punches killed the great escape artist. Some believed he was poisoned by revenge-seeking spiritualists. But now, after 100 years, new evidence has finally emerged. Medical experts have uncovered what really happened in those final days. The truth about Houdini's death isn't what anyone expected. Was it murder, accident, or something else entirely? Harry Houdini was born on March 24, 1874, in Budapest, Hungary. His real name was Erich Weiss. His parents were Rabbi Mayer Samuel Weiss and Cecilia Steiner. He was the 4th child out of 7, and one of his half-brothers was from his father's first marriage. Their home was full of noise, struggle, and faith. His younger sister, Carrie Gladys, would later lose most of her eyesight in a tragic accident. His father was 45 when Erich was born. He had studied in Germany and trained in law before becoming a rabbi. But life in Hungary during that time was growing harder for Jewish families. Anti-Semitism was spreading fast. Rabbi Weiss's old-fashioned ways didn't fit with the modern changes in Budapest, and his family felt the pressure from both poverty and discrimination. By 1876, things got so bad that Rabbi Weiss made a heartbreaking decision. He left his wife and 5 children behind and went to America alone, hoping to find a better future. For 2 years, Cecilia stayed in Budapest, barely surviving while raising young Erich, his siblings, and carrying another child. It was a painful and uncertain time. On July 3, 1878, Cecilia, who was pregnant again, left Hungary with her children. They boarded the SS Frisia and endured a rough 15-day journey in terrible steerage conditions, all while the heat in New York reached 95 degrees. When they arrived, they were likely met by Cecilia's sister, who had already settled in New York. Not long after, the whole family took a train to Appleton, Wisconsin, where Rabbi Weiss had found work as the town's first rabbi. They changed their last name to Weiss, and Erich became known as Erich. They lived on Appleton Street, which is now called Houdini Plaza. Rabbi Weiss became an American citizen on June 6, 1882. That small house in Appleton became the place where a 6-year-old boy quietly fell in love with locks. One day, he picked a lock that had been used to keep the kids out of a cabinet. What started as play soon became an obsession. He began opening locks, taking things apart, and learning how everything worked. His mother didn't think much of it at first, but she was watching a boy discover the skill that would change his life. But in 1882, everything collapsed. Rabbi Weiss lost his job at the Appleton Synagogue. Some said it was because he was too traditional and couldn't speak English well. But others believed it was because of infighting in the Jewish community. The congregation was mostly made up of German Jews who wanted someone of their own to lead. Rabbi Weiss, born in Hungary, didn't fit their plans. For 8-year-old Erich, it was a deep wound. He watched his family lose their home, their income, and their dignity. They moved to Milwaukee, where poverty took over their lives. His proud father now struggled to find even the most basic work. In Milwaukee, young Erich shined shoes and sold newspapers on freezing corners just to earn a few pennies. His father, once a respected rabbi, couldn't find steady work. Many nights, Erich went to bed cold and hungry. His mother did everything she could to keep the family fed, but the money was never enough. This suffering shaped Erich's mind. He began to believe that the only way to escape poverty was through his own skill and hard work. At just 9 years old, Erich joined a 5-cent traveling circus under the name Erich, Prince of the Air. He was small and flexible, twisting his body in ways that left audiences stunned. He had a trick called the dead man's drop, and even picked up a pin using only his eyelid. It was wild and risky work, but he loved it. Even though he was a child, the circus workers saw him as far more mature than his age. He was learning about timing, attention, and how to amaze people. These early shows were his first lessons in how to control a crowd. In 1887, when Eric was 13, the family moved again, this time to New York City. There, everything changed. At a local library, Eric found a book that would shape his future: the memoirs of French magician Jean-Eugène Robert Houdin. Houdin had performed for kings and even used magic to calm rebellions. His elegance and power amazed Eric. He was so inspired that he changed his name to Houdini, adding the I because he thought it meant like Houdin in French. He was wrong about the grammar, but it didn't matter. A new identity was born. By 1892, Eric had saved 75 cents to buy a trick coin. That was a lot of money for him at the time. He started performing small magic shows in his backyard, charging neighborhood kids to see his tricks. But that same year, something happened that would crush him. On October 5, 1892, his father died at age 63, likely from tongue cancer. Eric was 18. His father had always believed in him, and now he was gone. At the funeral, Eric made a silent promise that he would never let his mother suffer again. That vow became his fuel. After his father's death, Eric got a job cutting neckties in a Manhattan factory. He worked 12-hour days, 6 days a week. The place was dusty, loud, and unforgiving. But Eric didn't waste his breaks. Behind piles of fabric, he practiced magic. During lunch, he studied locks. One day, a police officer left behind a pair of handcuffs, and Eric couldn't stop staring at them. He studied every piece, learning how they worked. At night, he stayed up practicing escapes, using tools from the factory. No one around him knew the quiet boy with calloused hands was building a future as the most famous escape artist in the world. In 1891, Eric teamed up with Jacob Hyman, a friend from the factory, and together they became the Brothers Houdini. Their best trick was metamorphosis, where one of them would be tied up and locked inside a trunk, only to switch places with the other in seconds. The trick was likely copied from another performer, but their version was unique. When Jacob left the act, Eric's brother Theodore, nicknamed Dash, took his place. They struggled to earn money, performing at cheap museums and small fairs. But metamorphosis stayed with Houdini for life, and magicians still use it today. The worst of it came in 1893 when they had to work in dime museums. These were sad places where people paid pennies to see oddities and freak shows. Houdini performed for almost nothing, sometimes while his father was working in a tie factory and dying from cancer. Eric also shined shoes to survive. The conditions were humiliating, and he never forgot the shame. Later, he said those days were so painful that the less said about them, the better. Then came love. On June 22, 1894, Houdini married Bess Ronner, a Catholic girl from Brooklyn who performed in a singing group. They met at Coney Island and married just 3 weeks later. His mother didn't approve, but they went ahead anyway. Bess replaced his brother as his stage partner, and they became the Houdinis. She was small, quick, and perfect for their escape acts. Houdini adored her. He wrote her sweet notes and called her "precious lump of sweetness." Their love story began with shows at Coney Island and lasted 32 years. But even as their act improved, hate followed them. Being Jewish in 1890s America wasn't easy. In 1895, promoters sometimes refused to pay them simply because of their religion. Houdini later said that rivals insulted him behind his back, and some called him Judas during public hearings. Even Arthur Conan Doyle insulted him, mocking his heritage. The prejudice was everywhere, but Houdini never backed down. He kept pushing forward, determined to be so successful that no one could ignore him again. In 1899, everything changed. In St. Louis, at a police station, Houdini stripped naked and escaped handcuffs and shackles in just 2 minutes and 40 seconds. That performance caught the eye of Martin Beck, a powerful vaudeville manager. Beck saw Houdini's talent and sent him a telegram offering $60 to perform in Omaha. That offer turned into a full-season deal. Soon, Houdini was performing in the best theaters in the country. Around the same time, a rival stole Houdini's act and designs, a betrayal that hurt deeply. But Houdini kept going. In Kansas City, police locked him in a cell with special double-key locks. He escaped in under 7 minutes, completely naked and wearing 4 sets of handcuffs. It was headline news. In June 1900, Harry Houdini arrived in London feeling uncertain. He had come for a big booking at the Alhambra Theatre, but the manager claimed he didn't even know who Houdini was. Desperate, Houdini came up with a bold move. He walked into Scotland Yard, pretending to be a tourist, and pointed at a pair of handcuffs on display. When told they were impossible to remove, he calmly asked to try them on. Just 2 minutes later, he slipped out of them like it was nothing. The officers were stunned. It wasn't a planned challenge, but word of it spread fast. The manager who had brushed him off quickly hired him, first for 2 weeks, then 6 full months. That moment turned him from a nobody into a sensation. Europe now knew him as the Handcuff King, but success didn't stop trouble from finding him. In 1901, the police chief of Cologne, Werner Graf, accused Houdini of cheating. Graf told a newspaper that Houdini had offered him 20 marks to fake an escape. He also claimed Houdini used copies of keys and chains made by another man. Houdini fought back hard. He hired the best lawyer in Cologne and took Graf to court. The trial in 1902 became huge news across Germany. Graf said Houdini used a saw to break chains. Houdini said Graf gave him a broken lock on purpose. In court, Houdini proved his skills live in front of everyone. He won the case and cleared his name. His victory silenced critics who had called him a fraud. In 1901, Houdini came up with a new act that would push his limits even further. He called it the milk can escape. He would be handcuffed and locked inside a metal milk can filled with water. He had to hold his breath while escaping from the cuffs and the can. In 1902, during a show in Russia, something went wrong. The locks jammed. Houdini was stuck underwater too long and almost drowned. The moment terrified everyone. In 1908, he secretly had the can rebuilt in a small metal shop in Wolverhampton. A man named Harry Robbins worked with him late into the night to make it safer. "I'll hardly have time to get wet," Houdini joked after testing it. The milk can became one of his most famous stunts, but the Russian show reminded everyone that death was always close. In March 1904, Houdini faced his hardest public challenge. The London Daily Mirror gave him handcuffs made by a locksmith who spent 5 years designing them. They were said to be unpickable. Over 4,000 people gathered at the Hippodrome Theatre, with more than 100 reporters watching. Houdini stepped into his small escape tent and began working. He came out several times, sweating and exhausted. After 56 minutes, he asked to take off his coat, but the newspaper rep said no, afraid he'd see the mechanism. So Houdini grabbed a penknife with his teeth and cut the coat off himself. After 70 painful minutes, he finally broke free. The crowd lifted him onto their shoulders. He cried from exhaustion. That escape sealed his legend in England. Behind all these stunts was Houdini's brutal training routine. He took ice baths every day. He practiced holding his breath for long periods. In 1905, he he showed off his strength in Paris by escaping a straitjacket while hanging upside down from a tall building. 10,000 people watched from the street below. Even in 1926, at 52 years old, he held his breath for 91 minutes in a sealed underwater coffin at the Hotel Shelton in New York. Most people couldn't believe it. After 88 minutes, he started seeing yellow lights, but refused to stop until he broke the previous 60-minute record. His mind and body were trained for one purpose: survival. On July 7, 1912, he performed a terrifying escape in New York. He was locked in handcuffs and leg irons, nailed inside a wooden box, then thrown into the freezing East River. The box had 200 pounds of lead tied to it. In just 57 seconds, Houdini shot up to the surface completely free. He did it again in 1914 in front of 15,000 people. Some doctors called it the hardest stunt ever done and challenged him to do it under stricter rules. Police had to hold the crowds back. No one could believe he survived it. On January 6, 1906, he entered one of the most infamous jail cells in America, the Guiteau cell in Washington, D.C., named after the man who killed President Garfield. Houdini was stripped naked, searched by 3 doctors, and locked inside the cell with a mentally unstable prisoner. In just 26 minutes, he escaped and even played a trick by moving other prisoners around. A few days earlier, he had escaped from 2 other police stations in D.C., including one in only 18 minutes. On January 25, 1908, he performed the milk can escape at the Columbia Theater in St. Louis. But this time, the can was filled with beer instead of water. The fumes knocked him out cold. He had to be rescued before he drowned. The can weighed more than 250 pounds when full. It was so dangerous that he later sued other performers for copying the trick without understanding its risks. That close call pushed him to invent even more dangerous water escapes. On September 21, 1912, he introduced the scariest escape of all, the Chinese water torture cell. It was made in England for over $10,000 and weighed nearly 1,500 pounds. It held 250 gallons of water. Houdini was locked upside down by his feet and dropped into the glass tank while a live orchestra played. Once, during practice in 1913, he broke his ankle during the setup but still performed the act later. An axe was always kept nearby in case something went wrong. People in the crowd held their breath as he struggled beneath the water. In 1913, Houdini created something even worse: the double-fold, death-defying mystery. He was handcuffed and locked inside a milk can, which was then sealed inside a heavy wooden chest with multiple padlocks. If just one lock failed, or if he made a mistake, he would die inside. He first performed it on June 1, 1911, but it became most popular in 1913. Even other magicians refused to try it. The wooden chest was so strong it lasted for decades and was finally sold to David Copperfield in 2014. After his mother, Cecilia, died in 1913, Houdini was heartbroken. He started going to seances, hoping to talk to her, but instead of finding comfort, he found fraud. Mediums used hidden wires, fake knocking sounds, and pre-researched obituaries to trick people. By 1920, he had exposed over 50 different techniques. Families were paying up to $50 per session, worth over $600 today, to be lied to. His grief turned into a mission to protect others. In 1924, Houdini exposed a famous medium named Marjorie Crandon. She claimed to produce glowing ectoplasm during seances, but Houdini discovered it was cheesecloth soaked in paint, hidden in her body. She used her feet and even a rod made from animal parts to move objects. Houdini built a special box to trap her during the sessions. Even then, she managed to trick some people into thinking she had powers. The same year, he had a painful falling out with his friend Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. Doyle truly believed Houdini had supernatural powers, even though Houdini insisted he didn't. In one heated moment, Houdini showed Doyle how he could write spirit messages using code tricks. Doyle still believed it was real. Their friendship never recovered. In May 1924, Houdini published a 374-page book called A Magician Among the Spirits. He exposed more than 100 fake mediums. One had claimed to contact his mother, but called him Harry instead of Eric, her real nickname for him. That mistake made Houdini furious. He exposed mediums who used hidden wires and fake blindfold tricks. One in Boston charged $25 per session, while using a team of 12 spies around the city to gather information. His book caused such outrage that some mediums were even threatened by their own clients. In 1926, Houdini testified in front of Congress to support a law banning fortune-telling in Washington, D.C. Over 200 angry psychics came to protest. Houdini held up a sealed telegram and dared any of them to guess its contents. None could. He showed 15 different tricks used by fortune-tellers and revealed that some politicians had secretly paid for psychic advice. His bill didn't pass, but over 50 psychics were arrested afterward in other states. Houdini wasn't just a magician. In 1918, he starred in a 15-part film called The Master Mystery. He played a detective who escaped from real traps on camera. He refused to use special effects and did the dangerous stunts himself. In one scene, he escaped a diving suit underwater using a quick-release invention he had designed. He even created shots showing gears unlocking from the inside, something never done before in film. On March 18, 1910, he flew a plane in Australia and made history. He flew his French-made Voisin biplane at Digger's Rest, covering over 3.5 miles at 100 feet high in a flight that lasted 312 minutes. Only about 30 people saw it, including his wife, Bess. During an earlier attempt, he crashed, but kept it secret. That flight made him the first person to fly a powered plane in Australia. In 1921, Houdini started the Houdini Picture Corporation with his brother. They made The Man from Beyond, a spiritualist-themed movie. But in 1922, a fire destroyed their film sets and negatives. The company never recovered and made only one more film before shutting down. In 1918, he began an affair with Charmian London, the widow of author Jack London. It started while he was performing at the Hippodrome in New York. She called him Magic Lover in her diary. Their romance lasted until 1923, when the press exposed it, creating a scandal. His marriage to Bess suffered, but Charmian kept writing to him until his death in 1926. Back in 1906, Houdini published a book called The Right Way to Do Wrong. It exposed how criminals picked locks and ran scams. In 1920, he updated it with tips from his experience flying planes. It became a strange mix of crime prevention and flying advice, showing how wide his interests really were. In 1915, Harry Houdini tried something no one else dared. Near Santa Ana, California, he let himself be buried alive 6 feet deep with no coffin, no escape hatch, just dirt pressing down on every part of his body. He had to claw his way to the surface using only his hands and raw strength. But the deeper he dug, the weaker he got. Panic kicked in. He couldn't breathe. The pressure of the earth nearly crushed his lungs. Just as his hand broke through the topsoil, he passed out. His assistants dragged him out. In his diary, he called it very dangerous and said, "The weight of the earth is killing." Even after that close call, Houdini didn't stop. He kept doing buried alive acts for years, always pushing the limit. Then came one of the biggest illusions in history. On January 7, 1918, in front of over 5,000 people at the Hippodrome Theater in New York, Houdini made a 6,000-pound elephant disappear. Her name was Jenny. She stood 8 feet tall, and the box she entered looked small, but it was custom-built with hidden mirrors. As the doors swung open, she was gone. Nobody saw how it happened, not even fellow magicians. The secret wasn't revealed for nearly 90 years. What most people didn't know was that an English magician named Charles Morat had sold Houdini the trick. He had first made a donkey vanish, then told Houdini, "If you want to shock people, make an elephant disappear." Houdini did just that. But it took more than mirrors. The massive size of the hippodrome stage, the clever angle of the seats, and the timing of everything played into the illusion. It was magic, but also math and muscle. In August 1926, at the Hotel Shelton in New York, Houdini tested something darker. Egyptian performer Rahman Bey claimed he could survive inside a sealed coffin underwater because of mystical powers. Houdini didn't believe it, so he challenged him by doing the same thing himself. A 700-pound coffin was lowered into a swimming pool. Houdini stayed inside for 91 minutes, 31 minutes longer than Bey ever had. At one point, he saw yellow lights and nearly fell asleep. That would have meant death. He later wrote that he had to watch himself closely so he wouldn't slip into unconsciousness. It was the last big stunt he ever did. 2 months later, he would be dead. Houdini also became famous for escaping from straitjackets while hanging high above the ground. He started doing these dangerous aerial escapes in 1915 in Kansas City. Sometimes he was suspended 40 to 60 feet in the air, twisting and turning as huge crowds watched below. In Los Angeles that same year, he freed himself in 2 minutes and 7 seconds while dangling 50 feet high. That was 1 minute faster than he'd ever done on a stage. But it wasn't just a show. These stunts hurt. The straps cut off circulation. The height made him dizzy. One small mistake could mean a deadly fall. His last one likely happened in Indianapolis on April 2, 1925, closing a full decade of these terrifying performances. On October 11, 1926, while performing in Albany, Houdini broke his ankle. The pain was unbearable, but he didn't cancel his shows in Montreal. He arrived at the Princess Theatre on crutches and, against all logic, performed the water torture cell escape. He had to be hoisted upside down in a glass tank filled with water, locked in place. And he did it, despite the injury. Water poured off him as he emerged. The audience was stunned. They had no idea it would be one of his last escapes. Then came the blow that changed everything. On October 22, 1926, Houdini was resting in his dressing room at the same Montreal theater. His ankle still hurt. He lay on a couch, reading mail, when a student named J. Gordon Whitehead came in and asked if it was true that Houdini could take any punch to the stomach. Before Houdini could even sit up or brace himself, Whitehead punched him in the abdomen, hard, 4 or 5 times. Houdini was already in pain, but now he couldn't breathe. He waved his hand, asking Whitehead to stop. Witnesses later said Houdini looked like he was in serious distress right after the hits. But instead of going to the hospital, he kept performing. Just 2 days later, on October 24th, Houdini got on stage at the Garrick Theatre in Detroit with a fever of 104 degrees. He had severe stomach pain, but refused to cancel. The theater was packed with 2,500 people. He still made coins disappear, pulled off full escapes, and finished the full 2.5-hour show. At one point, he had to step off stage from the pain, but he returned and kept going. When the final curtain fell, he collapsed and was rushed to Grace Hospital. The doctors quickly found the problem. His appendix had burst. Infection was spreading fast. On October 25th, they performed emergency surgery. Gangrene had already started. The poison had leaked throughout his body. But even then, Houdini refused painkillers. He wanted to stay fully awake, still believing he could will his body to survive. Reporters stood outside the hospital. His wife Bess never left his side. But this time, Houdini couldn't escape. Not from this. On October 31st, 1926, Halloween, Houdini died at 1:26 p.m. He was 52. His final words to his brother were, "I'm tired of fighting." The man who had escaped everything, jails, tanks, locks, chains, couldn't escape death. He was buried in the same bronze coffin he once used for his buried alive trick. 4 days later, over 2,000 people came to say goodbye. Other magicians broke a wand over his grave. It meant no one else could carry his magic. After investigating, the insurance company said Whitehead's punches directly led to his death and paid double the usual amount to his estate. But the story didn't end there. Houdini and his wife had made a secret code. Rosabelle, answer, tell, pray, answer, look, tell, answer, answer, tell. It was their signal from the afterlife. For 10 straight years, Bess held seances every Halloween. The last one was on October 31st, 1936, at the Knickerbocker Hotel in Los Angeles. There were 300 people there, with handcuffs and tambourines on the table. But nothing happened. Bess finally said, "Houdini did not come through. My last hope is gone. It is finished. Good night, Harry." She never tried again. Then came a chilling twist. Some believed Houdini had been murdered. In 1924, he had publicly exposed a Boston medium named Mina Crandon, known as Marjorie. Her spirit brother, Walter, once said, "Houdini will be gone by Halloween." He died exactly on October 31st, 1926. What made this strange was that no autopsy was ever done. Biographers later said it would have been easy to poison him, and no one would ever know. The theory gained traction. Could it have been revenge? In 2024, nearly 100 years later, new medical research finally shattered the punch theory. Doctors proved that Houdini already had appendicitis before Whitehead hit him. The blows didn't cause it. He had delayed getting treatment, and that made it worse. Modern studies showed that waiting more than 24 hours to treat appendicitis greatly increases the risk of death. Houdini ignored the warning signs. He kept performing through the pain, through the fever, through the collapse. The punches were just terrible timing.